Welcome to California in Focus. I'm David Mastio, and today we're talking about prison walking money and the fact, or our interpretation, that it may cost California billions of dollars in a new lawsuit. Joining me today is the Center Square's Kenneth Schrupp, California reporter. Kenneth, tell me about this story.
Hey, David. In 1973, then Governor Ronald Reagan signed the statute into law requiring that prisoners be paid $200 upon their release. And that includes when they're transferred to, say, a county or city jail for further proceedings. So when they walk out that gate, so long as they're not going to another state prison, whether another state or to a federal prison, they are supposed to get $200. And the point of this was to ensure that people don't become criminals upon their release. Back then, when this was signed into effect, $200 is equivalent of about $1,500 today. And that number hasn't changed or gone up with inflation. It's just been that $200. But back then, it was worth $1,500.
Ronald Reagan is a generous guy.
Ronald Reagan is a generous guy. And, well, maybe he really thought that this is what people need to not go back to a life of crime, not become homeless. The issue here now is that the California Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation has very much violated what's a clear statute. They have been deducting costs out of this $200, such as giving the inmates clothes or buying them transportation. It seems without even their consent. And this results in that $200 ending up more like $70 or even less. And they apparently have admitted that they are aware that they're in violation of the law. They allegedly have admitted that there's no authority for them to deduct any costs from that $200. So it seems that the state has now created a class action class of potentially millions of people whom they will owe however much they didn't pay or deducted from that $200. They'll owe all the money to people who were transferred to, like a county facility, county jail for another trial or proceeding, and then got released and from those lower jails and didn't get paid. That's all due with interest. And in California, interest in the absence of any earlier agreement is 10%. So as you can imagine, 10% interest on even $200 from 1973 compounding year after year is a lot of money. In fact, it's about $26,000. And that's before the judge assigns any damages in excess of just what is owed and interest on what is owed. And we know damages could be many times that. I mean, let's imagine that the damage includes to, society for the impact of people perhaps having to commit more crime and steal because they came out of prison with $0 in their pocket and nothing to go on. Who knows the cost that that a judge could assign to this? So if you do the math, there's about $3.3 million of new debt to prisoners per year. If you assume there's about 30,000 prisoners released per year, and 3,000 of the inmates receive zero money because they're being transferred to a county or city jail facility, and that of those other 27,000 prisoners, the typical inmate only gets about $100. So that would be about $3.3 million of new debt to prisoners per year since 1973, and 10% interest on that debt. You add up to $4.65 billion. So that's just a very rough approximation of what the money owed to prisoners right now is with the interest that is standard. With the judge's damages payment, damages, and interest on damages, we could be looking at something in the tens of billions of dollars.
And that doesn't include attorney's fees.
No, that doesn't include attorney's fees. Attorney's fees are usually about 25 to 40% on class action settlements. In this case, this lawsuit was spearheaded by a combination of the UC Berkeley Criminal Law and Justice Center working with former San Francisco DA Chesa Boudin, who was former San Francisco District Attorney and current LA District Attorney's George Gascon's handpicked successor, who was recalled in a 2021, I believe, election. He did this in partnership with Adelson, which is a leading for-profit class action law firm that collects billions of dollars a year in revenue from class action settlements. So if we have a $4.65 billion settlement, even if we're taking a very conservative 25% attorney fee, that's about $1 billion of revenue for the UC Berkeley nonprofit law center to take in with Adelson.
Did you happen to check whether the UC Berkeley Law Center is state funded or partially state funded?
Well, given that it's part of the University of California system, even if it's not receiving any direct funding from the state, but is getting nonprofit tax status from the state, that still is a state subsidy. So in at least some manner, it does seem like it would be the state paying itself and just shuffling the money around, while the people who institute that change, in this case, the lawyers, would get a sizable fraction of that.
Kenneth, thanks for joining us today. Listeners can keep up with this story and more at thecentersquare.com.